In this lecture, we'll be studying about process control block. So first of all, let us see what is this process control block. Let us try to understand what are the uses of this process control block as far as a process is concerned. So it says each process is represented in the operating system by a process control block abbreviated as PCB, and it is also called a task control block. So process control block is something that we use to represent a particular process in the operating system. So let us take an example diagram to see how the process control block looks like, and let us see what are the things we have in the process control block which helps us to represent that process in the operating system. So this diagram given here is the example of a process control block. So we have things like process state, process number, process counter, registers, memory limits, list of open files, and so on. So this is just an example diagram showing a process control block and what are the things present in the process control block. So now let us see one by one what are the things we actually have in a process control block, and let us see what does those things represent or tell about the process in an operating system. So the first thing that we have is a process ID. So process ID or process number, as it is given in this example, it shows the unique number or unique ID of a particular process. So every process has to be represented by a unique ID which will identify that process. So this process ID is the unique number or identification that identifies a particular process, and this is one of the things that is present in a process control block which is used to represent a particular process. Now the next one that we have is process state. So what is process state? Process state tells us the particular state in which a process is at that particular moment. Now in the previous lectures, we studied about process state, and we saw that a process can be in different states like the new state, running state, waiting state, terminated state, and so on. So this process state will tell in which of those states is the process in at that particular moment. So this is also another thing that is there in the process control block which will represent a particular process. So the next one that we have is a program counter. So the program counter, it indicates the address of the next instruction that has to be executed for that particular process. Now let me explain what this means. Now we already studied that a process is a program in execution. When a program is in execution, at that moment we call it a process. So when a process is being executed, the lines of instructions or the lines of codes are executed line by line. Now when it is being executed, this program counter tells us the address of the next line of instruction that has to be executed. So we have lines of instructions that are being executed, and at a particular moment, what is the address of the next line that has to be executed? That is given by the program counter. So the program counter indicates the address of the next line of instruction that has to be executed for a particular process. Alright, so the next one that we have is CPU registers. So CPU registers, it tells us the registers that are being used by a particular process. So there are different kind of registers like the index registers, stack pointers, general purpose registers, and so on. So these CPU registers will tell us the particular registers that are being used by a particular process. So this is also another thing that we have in the process control block. So the next one that we have is CPU scheduling information. So the CPU scheduling information has the priority of the processes. It has the pointer to the scheduling queue and also other scheduling parameters. Now scheduling is a very important topic as far as operating system is concerned, and there will be a whole topic regarding it which we will be discussing later. But for now, let me give you a brief idea of what scheduling is. So we know that there are many processes that are waiting to be executed. It's not only one process, but there are many processes that are waiting to be executed. So scheduling determines which process has to be executed first, or it determines the order in which the processes has to be executed. So there may be processes with higher priority than other processes, so they may have to be executed first. And also, when processes are all waiting in a queue, it has to be determined how much time has to be allotted to a particular process, and all those kind of things are determined by the scheduling algorithms. So that is what we mean by scheduling, and so the CPU scheduling information is also stored in the process control block. It is not shown in this example over here, but this is also another thing that we have in the process control block. Now next we have the memory management information. So the memory management information, from the name itself you must have understood, it represents the memory that is being used by a particular process. So different aspects of the memory, all those information regarding that will be stored in the memory management information, and that is another thing that is stored in the process control block. Now next we have accounting information. So this is also not shown in this example, but we have the accounting information. So accounting information keeps an account of certain things like the resources that are being used by the particular process. So there are different resources that are used by the process, like it can be CPU, it can be time, it can be memory, and so on. So accounting information, it keeps an account of all those resources that are being used by a particular process for its execution. So this is also another thing that is there in the process control block, and it is used to represent the process. And lastly, we have the input-output status information. So input-output status information represents the input-output devices that are being assigned to a particular process. So a process during its execution may need to use some of the input-output devices. So which are the input-output devices assigned to a particular process? That information is stored in the input-output status information, and this is also a part of the process control block. So we see that all these things over here, they can represent a process. They represent the different aspects of a particular process, and all these things together, they are in a block known as the process control block, and hence we see that the process control block is used to represent a particular process in the operating system. So I hope with that process control block is clear to you. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.